Friends, how lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, I keep saying that. We can't actually see you, but you can see us. But anyway, you know what I mean. James, good to see you. I can see you.
Nice to see you too, Ian, and I can see you also.
That's excellent. Now, before we go any further, friends, don't forget, you can share this video if you've enjoyed it with the little button down the bottom here. Click share, and it'll give you a link. You can paste that into social media. James, you do that all the time, don't you?
I do put it on my social media, yes, and do get some good comments. So some very interesting comments from last week. Yeah, so
Great,
that was
good.
great. Yeah,
Fabulous. And then, friends, so you don't miss out as well, underneath there's a subscribe button, and it'll be coming up at the end as well. So you can join us in future weeks and not miss out. Now, James, where are we?
we are coming up to Easter 4, the fourth Sunday of Easter.
I'm glad you answered that in a temporal rather than a spatial sense. That's really helpful.
Yes,
because that is what I was asking.
I thought it was.
It's good. We could get into a philosophical discussion about where are we actually on Zoom, but let's not
Indeed.
go there, shall we? No, fine. So Easter 4. Now, we've got a slightly unusual situation here with the lectionary, have we not?
Well, we do, because during Easter, there's always a reading from Acts, it seems, and the lectionary says that the reading from Acts must be the first
Or second.
reading. So, in other words, you've basically got to have that and the gospel.
Assuming you're being good Anglicans. And
assuming you're being good Anglicans, yes, which we know
Good.
not everybody is.
I wouldn't dare suggest.
Couldn't possibly comment on
No,
that.
no, absolutely.
And I suppose my theory about this is, because I mean, I never know why lectionary compilers decide things, because they never really tell you most of the time. But my guess is that they're wanting us to make sure that we hear the effects of the resurrection of Jesus in the life of the early church alongside the gospel of Easter. So that feels how it works.
That is good. And it's interesting because I did see a conversation the other day where someone said, I wish people would talk more about Easter season. We get the same thing with Christmas, don't we? That in the sort of secular calendar, we get the run up to Christmas, and then Christmas Day and Christmas stops. And then we get the sort of run up to Easter. And the person made this comment. They said, I wish we could think less of Easter as the end of Lent and more as the beginning of the Easter season, which of course, as good Anglicans, we should be doing.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, to be fair, I think the lectionary does help us with that, if we're minded to run with it. So, yeah.
I just want to go back on that little question about readings, because there is some irony, isn't it? I mean, both you and I would happily call ourselves evangelicals. And that would mean that we hope that our preaching and ministry and spirituality is rooted in scripture. So is it not an irony that traditional Anglicans will probably have 5 portions of scripture read, Old Testament, epistle, gospel, psalm, a couple of psalms, whatever, and yet in many evangelical churches you'll have one short Bible reading?
I do think it is deeply ironic, and it's something I struggle with, really, because I mean, when I grew up, and I grew up in a sort of middle of the road liberal Catholic kind of environment, and we sang 2 or 3 psalms every Sunday, and the psalms.
You were a choir boy, were you not?
I was a choir boy, and that's right, and then had 3 readings, and of course the psalms have almost disappeared from Anglican worship, and I think that's utterly tragic. We really need to get to grips with that. But also, as you say, I mean, just reading 2 readings instead of 3 is a very strange thing. I think evangelicals need to address that. Really, it's one of those questions we need to challenge ourselves.
And I think particularly if I'm traveling preaching somewhere else, I'll always say, well, okay, that's a New Testament reading. Which Old Testament reading should we have with it?
Because very good.
Putting those 2 things together.
Yeah.
And in fact, that'll come out, I think, in our discussion here. So.
Yeah, I think it will actually today, because this particular passage we're looking at has very obvious links with Old Testament and Gospel, as well as the Acts. So
we haven't actually told our viewers what
No.
the readings are, have we? So we ought to do that. So the Gospel lectionary reading is John 10, 22 to 30. And that's where we've got this slightly unusual thing where in this week in Easter 4, that the lectionary actually divides John 10 into 3 sections.
Yes.
So you read them in turns, which is interesting, assuming that people are doing that sort of integrated thing across 3 years. The epistle is Revelation 7.
Yes.
9 to 17, which is a great passage. Actually, on my blog that I posted yesterday, I do actually have some summary notes on that. But of course, you might even want a commentary if you want to preach on that. But that's fantastic. This is the verse, it's Revelation 7 verse 9, that we're all appealing to now in the discussions about ethnicity in the church, are we not?
Yeah.
Because John hears the voice counting out what looks like an ordered, disciplined tribes of Israel. Then he turns to see and discovers that this Israel in Jesus is actually people from every tribe, language, people, and nation. So the multicultural, multi-ethnic people of God. The new Israel in Jesus. But we won't talk about that. So the other reading is, we've got the Acts reading, which is Acts 9:36 to 43.
Yeah. The story of Dorcas and the raising of Dorcas.
The story of Tabitha. Yes. Also called whose name means Dorcas. We'll
come on to that. Yes. Yeah.
Now, my first comment is that, I mean, at one level, it seems to me quite surprising that the lectionary has landed on this, because I don't know, does it look like one of those standout passages?
I don't know. It doesn't really, but I mean, it is. It in many ways, it is one of the most remarkable miracles of the early church. I mean, that's certainly true, isn't it? I mean, and raising of the dead is got to be always a standout miracle. So there's an obvious connection with Easter there, that the life of the risen Christ returns to Dorcas, who is a faithful follower of Jesus, obviously. So that's seeing it, but I mean, I suppose the question is, one of the questions that people will be wanting to puzzle over, is this normal? Is this meant to be normal in the life of the church? Are we meant to raise the dead every week or not?
I think we should hold on to that question. Can we come back to can you remind me? We'll come back to that at the end. I think that is really, really important. But we need to do a bit of work first. I think two things. You mentioned that we need to be reading the Old Testament to set the context and make connections and so on. And this is a good example of it. And it is, as you say, it's really striking, isn't it, that this looks like an extraordinary miracle. And yet, in the narrative of Luke Acts as a whole, Luke doesn't make all that much of it. We get, I mean, for me, the most striking contrast, and people do puzzle over this, is that in John 11, when Lazarus is raised, this is like a massive sort of turning point. This is extraordinary. This anticipates Jesus' resurrection. There are lots of linguistic connections. We noticed when we talked about John 20 about the language of the cloths and things around him. So this is really, really pivotal. And of course, in the shape of the gospel narrative of the fourth gospel, this is the trigger moment where Jesus' opponents finally say, right, okay, we've got to do away with him. He's getting too much support. On the other hand, here we have in Luke Acts, we have the son of the widow of Nain raised from the dead in Luke 7. And we also have some other connections as well, aren't there?
The raising of Jairus' daughter in Mark 5, Luke 8.
Of course, again. And it's strange that in one sense you'd expect Luke to kind of make more of it. And I think Luke, absolutely. You might well do, and yet, I mean, you know, there's that question, isn't there, about what is Luke's purpose in telling us this story? You know, it's interesting. Is he telling us it because he's expecting us to do this, or is there something more subtle in here? Is he telling us something about Peter and Peter's ministry? Yes, indeed.
Which I think is a really good question.
And it's very striking. Again, I've commented that elsewhere on the blog that in Luke 7, with the raising of the widow of Nain's son, there must be a shorter way of addressing him. If only we had his name, that would be useful, wouldn't it? That what's really interesting is that I mentioned this in the context of Luke using numerical composition, which I know some people find a bit spooky, but we did talk about numerical composition last week. Actually, in that narrative, the word compassion is at the numerical center of the account. So actually, for Luke, it's not so much the dramatic miracle and the proof that the son is raised. It's actually that Jesus sees the widow's grief and is moved with compassion. So, I think we'll notice some parallels as well with, as we look in the passage in detail, we'll notice some sort of linguistic parallels there.
Definitely.
Now, so we talked about Peter's ministry, and again, this is quite interesting, isn't it? That this comes at a kind of a transition point in this gospel. So I just happened to notice, I think I mentioned this on the blog, that we've got the appointment of those who are to serve in chapter 6. Then one of those in chapter 7 is Stephen. Of course, he then is the first martyr. And then you get this sort of persecution breaking out. And then the believers are scattered, but then they gossip and they take the message with them. Then in chapter 8, you've got Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. So we've got the beginnings of the gospel breaking out beyond the bounds of
Judaism.
And then chapter 9, drama. Saul, his confrontation with Jesus, and then so Saul's introduced. So we got the sort of new transition thing, and then we come back to the ministry of Peter.
But I think it's interesting that Luke tells us this story about Peter, because obviously, Peter is, I mean, he's on the coast. He's Joppa, it's the coast of Israel. And in Acts chapter 1, I mean, Jesus says very clearly to the disciples, you'll be my witnesses in all Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And up until this point, Peter's traveling into that has been really very, very slow. Now, as you hear of the ministry to the Gentiles that Paul has, Peter also is making progress. I mean, he's kind of got to the coast now.
Okay.
And I think that's really interesting, that we're seeing these ripples from the pond begin to move outwards from the centre in Jerusalem.
And it's actually done Luke does it in quite a sophisticated way in the narrative. He doesn't just sort of do one thing and then from the other.
No.
He's actually interweaving these themes, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he I think, as you point out in the blog, from now on, he parallels, in a sense, the ministries of Peter and Paul.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
really...
cue for my screen share, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, that'd be great.
I've just got a little table here, so we'll just share that. And this is I can't remember where I picked this up from. I think quite a few commentaries. I think Ben Witherington's commentary I've used. I think a number of commentaries actually note this. So we've got these key stages in their ministry. So we've got preaching about Jesus being raised. We've got the healing of the lame man in Acts 3. And then we've got phrases about them. So strikingly, Luke uses the same phrase, that he speaks full of the Spirit. Yeah. Which again, we've seen that's pretty significant in the gospel as well, that Luke, Jesus goes into the desert with full of the Spirit, and he comes out in the power of the Spirit. So that's important. Yeah. This is a great phrase, isn't it? God did extraordinary miracles through.
As if a miracle isn't extraordinary anyway.
I know it is. That's really good. And I don't think it actually, raising the dead isn't actually listed amongst those.
No.
And then each of them lay hands on someone to receive the Spirit.
Yeah.
In different places. There's severe rebuke of opponents. Yeah. Both raise someone from the dead.
This story here. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got that's right.
And then that's the raising of the boy who falls.
Oh, Eutychus.
Eutychus, yes.
He falls out the window.
Yes.
A model of what happens with young people. They drop off and then they drop out.
Drop out, yes, exactly.
That's a great phrase I heard about 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I heard somebody say that too. I think my maybe the same person.
And then this is fabulous. The episode when they're both released from prison.
Which has got lovely humour in it as well.
It's got great, isn't it? Where Peter's knocking at the door and people are praying, saying,
classic.
Lord, release Peter and prevent us from being distracted by anything that's interrupting our prayer. And of course, it's Peter knocking at the door. Yeah. There's a very funny Riding Light sketch about that. So there's something programmatic going on here, isn't it? Luke's making his point with the shape of his narrative. It's not clumsy though. I mean, it's not an artifice. He doesn't just do it in order. There's quite a
Luke is very. I mean, he's structural all the way through the gospel, isn't he? I mean, as we've seen before, and ditto through Acts. And it well repays studying those structures actually.
Our friend Steve Walton would be very encouraged about that, wouldn't he?
I think he would. Yeah. And if he's watching,
hi, Steve, Mr. Axe.
Yeah,
Dr.
Axe. Yeah, Dr. Axe.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say something. Well, yeah, I think what do we take away from this? That primarily Peter is apostle to the Jews, and primarily Paul is apostle to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
So Luke is doing through narrative structure what Paul is doing in his sentences in Ephesians 2, talking about those who are near and those who are far off are now one body.
Yeah.
In reconciled.
And I think Luke, in this story, actually hints at Peter's calling to the Jews, because if you compare this with the next story about Cornelius, Peter goes to Joppa much quicker to help Dorcas on Tabitha than he does to Cornelius. So there's definitely a spring in his step.
There is
here, but which is not the same later on. And whereas Paul, of course, is always absolutely eager to go and evangelize the Gentiles. Yeah.
Well, let's look at the text itself in a little bit more detail. Something that I've just been struck by again, and I don't think I noticed it in the commentary, is that Luke here uses a phrase he actually uses a lot. He uses it 69 times in the Gospel, which is egeneto.
Yeah.
That is it in the authorized version. It came to pass that
it happened. Yeah.
which is in just not. It's not immediately in this episode in 936. It's just in the previous bit, 932. And I'm looking at the ESV. It's quite funny. Peter went here and there among them all.
Yeah, it's great. That's a great phrase, isn't it? Yeah.
Which I think is echoing the authorized version. But the contemporary translation, he goes from place to place. So it came to pass that. I just wondered whether, I know when Mark uses that phrase, I've observed that he's making it sound like, trying to make it sound like scripture, because it sounds like the Old Testament where you get that, and it came to pass that structure. So, but I don't know. And again, in verse 37, we get a similar thing. It came to pass that in those days she became. So I say, is this Luke telling us that he's now
writing scripture?
He's the new story of God's dealing with his people. We should ask Steve about that.
Yes, it may just be a sort of Semitism that's got carried forward, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing which is really striking here is that you have male-female pair.
Yeah, this is interesting, and not only male-female pair, but a rich-poor pair as well. I think, or a poor-rich pair, because Aeneas, as a paralysed man, would have been, he would have been at the bottom of the social heap. Whereas there's indicators in the text that Dorcas Tabitha is well off. I think you point out in the blog she has an upper room. She's given to philanthropy and charity and so on. So there's a classic Lucan mix of circumstance. The gospel is for everybody without restraint, without prejudice.
It is. That male-female pair is really noticeable in the gospel because you have, on the one hand, you have the apostles, and then you have in chapter 8 you have the women who support. You have right at the very beginning you have Simeon and Anna. You have the contrast between Zachariah's reaction to Gabriel and Mary's reaction to Gabriel. Again, male-female pair. In the parables of the lost, you have the shepherd losing the sheep and the woman who loses the coins, and it just it goes on. I've got elsewhere, I might have a link to it, I've got elsewhere a list of all those.
Yes, I think you have. I think we've talked about it before. I mean, I think there's 27 pairs in the gospel, if I remember right.
Wow. Okay.
Which is quite a lot.
That is good memory.
But he clearly carries on doing that here.
I don't think I emphasized in the blog the rich poor pairing, but I think you're right as well. I mean, certainly there's a lot of markers about the wealth. I mean, Joppa itself, the location is, I mean, I don't know if Lydda was a poor area, but Joppa was a wealthy area. Because the trade there and ports would have been.
And remains so. I mean, it's in modern day Tel Aviv. So,
Well, Tel Aviv is a little bit inland, but it's not far.
I think it's in the sort of wider conurbation of Tel Aviv now. It's probably,
that's true. Now, the other thing I think I would want to highlight, and I'm not sure, again, if I've said this so explicit in the blog, but again, one thing that struck me was that Luke also has Jesus going to those on the margins and the outside, but also coming to the pious, observant Jew. And there's real emphasis here. She was full of good works. Now, interesting, quite a number of modern translations say and acts of charity, but of course that's charity not in the authorized version sense of translating the word love, but actually it's the root is the word eleos, acts of mercy.
Yes, and she's a disciple, so that's code for she's already a Christian, as it were. I mean,
absolutely.
So that's
And the only time in the New Testament where the feminine form of disciple, Matheteia, is used.
Uniquely. Yes, very interesting that, isn't it? So clearly something Luke wants to emphasize for us. Which is entirely of a piece with what we've just said about his pairings of men and women and so on.
There's something interesting about names there as well. The fact that we know Aeneas and Tabitha's name. I just noticed that's relatively unusual in miracle stories because the focus is supposed to be on the miracle rather than on the individual. So we do find in the Gospels that sometimes people are named, sometimes they are not.
And of course, Richard Bauckham has a theory about that, as we've I think may have explored before.
We might just remind us of that
theory. The point I suppose he's making is that when people are named, then it's probably because the early church knew them as disciples of Jesus. So they were people in whom the story had resided, who'd protected and guarded the story and told the story, and were the sources of the story. So that seems quite likely, I think. I do think, I mean, Tabitha is an Aramaic name, of course, isn't it? And
it is.
And I do like the idea that, I think one of the commentaries points this out, that Peter would have said Tabitha cum in Aramaic to raise her.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Whereas, of course, in the raising of Jairus' daughter, Jesus says, Talitha cum, little girl, get up.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I noticed that in the Western text of Mark 5, which is the raising of Jairus' daughter, that there is a variant in the text, and
She's called Tabitha as well.
She's called Tabitha, yeah, because of confusion with this story, I think.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So that's
a
really
little pun, really. It's a kind of Aramaic pun.
Yeah. So, how do you interpret that in terms of its significance?
Well, I think I mean, I suppose because I think Luke is trying to connect the stories for us and saying to us, look, we know exactly what I've told you what Jesus did, and now I'm telling you what Peter did, and Peter is simply imitating what his Lord did, although with one particular and distinctive exception, of course, which is Peter.
Well, go on. What is the exception?
Which is Peter had to pray to Jesus, as it were, to raise the dead, whereas Jesus does it in his own power and strength as the incarnate Son of God. So, but otherwise, it seems that Peter has kind of completely got the idea that discipleship is simply about copying Jesus in every way that is relevant and possible.
Does that mean that we're beginning to find an answer to the question you asked at the beginning? Is this unusual, or is this something that we should expect to see?
It might be, and of course the tension here, I guess, is that that's not been the experience of the church in terms of its widespread ministry. There are, of course, stories of people being raised from the dead, but and I no reason at all to doubt any of those stories. But it's not part of our everyday experience, is it?
No, it isn't. Although I also have reflected on that and noticed that it's not actually part of the everyday experience of the church in Acts either.
No.
In the sense that we have a couple of examples in the Gospels, and we only have a couple of examples in Acts. Now, when you look at the time period that Acts covers, it's quite a few decades.
Yeah.
And we've got just a couple of examples.
Yeah, so maybe the frequency is not so different now.
I think people do have a sense that you read through Acts and people being healed here, healed there, dropping a napkin. Oh, he's healed. Shadow cast over somebody else. He's healed. It's all kind of like, well, clearly Peter and Paul are the locus of this stuff. Nevertheless, there's the everyday kind of grind of just carrying on, and of course, there's the strange paradox that this is all happening in the context of persecution and of people being displaced because of their faith and going to other places and getting on with life. And of course, the other interesting thing, again, maybe to hold that together in this narrative, is that here we have Tabitha, now known for being raised from the dead, but primarily known for being full of good works and acts of charity. And the programmatic comment by Luke at the beginning, Acts 2:42, which is that the believers had all things in common, that they broke bread together, which means they shared meals as well as remembering Jesus, that they attended to the apostles' teaching, which of course we now have in the scriptures particularly, and that they held all things in common. And then you get Barnabas selling up his land and so on. So you've actually got acts of charity, common life together, studying the scriptures, hearing the stories about Jesus, blessing people, prayer, worship, and those things are actually the dominant. And then that seems to me to be the context into which these extraordinary things are happening. There's some other bits of parallels to notice as well. We've got all the people weeping, which again at Jairus' daughter, again, people weeping, and Peter puts them all outside.
Yes.
Which is interesting. As you say, he knelt down and prayed. And then I was quite struck by this, and I don't know if there's any significance. In verse 40, again, just reading this afresh, he turned to the body.
Yes, that's really.
You noticed that?
No, I think that is really interesting that he wasn't praying, because if I was doing this, perish the thought that I'd have to do this, but I think I would kneel down, as it were, facing the body.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you? I mean. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah. So, but he's praying to God, and then he has to turn. But also, it says he turns to the body. It doesn't say turn to her.
No,
he turns to the body. I wonder if Luke's just saying to us, she really was dead.
Probably dead. Yeah.
This is a corpse.
Yeah.
I mean, the other context in which that word soma is used is in the context of slavery, where slaves are discussed, are generally referred to as somatos, bodies. I don't think there's a particular connection there, but it does strike me that the language here is that she's dead and gone. She isn't a She isn't a living being. But then he addresses her personally, Tabitha, arise, as you said, that echo of Jesus. And she opened her eyes. I like the fact that it's when she sees Peter, she sits up.
Yeah.
Like she wouldn't just sit up anyway. Like, oh, okay, I'm alive again now. So, there we go.
Yeah.
The other parallel I noticed is that he gave her his hand and raised her up.
Yes.
And then he presented to them too, which again, you get the echo of the actions of Jesus. Well, actually, one other interesting echo there is that when Peter heals Simon's mother-in-law, it says Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark says he took her by the hand and presented her. And of course, the widow of Nain, again, Jesus gives the son, the raised son, he gives her to them.
Right. Yeah.
So you got lots of parallels there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating context, fascinating content. James, how are we going to preach on this?
Yeah, interestingly, I was looking at how I've preached on this in the past before I came, and I realized that the thing that I've particularly focused on is the imitation of Christ, to do what Jesus has shown us to do. And actually, that's something that is essentially very simple. It's not complicated and sophisticated. Peter does what he saw Jesus do. And there's power in that, the power of the gospel, the power of the resurrected Lord. And, we don't have to sort of have, we can easily overcomplicate things in the church, can't we? And we think, oh gosh, all this stuff. Just do what it says on the tin and the Lord is with you, And so I that's one of the things that I've focused on in the past. What about you? I mean,
I think I would agree with you there. I think one of the things I wonder, though, if that, just to take that a step further, one of the questions we've got in the Church of England is, what is a disciple? Because we've got this newish vision of being, we want to be a church of disciple making disciples, and people have complained and said, yeah, but nobody's ever told us what a disciple is. And I wonder whether your reflection on preaching on this actually gives us the answer, which is, as you say, a disciple is someone who, well, the disciples, Luke says this exactly, doesn't he? In Acts 4, they noticed that these were not learned men, but they had been with Jesus.
Yeah.
And actually, it's about spending time with Jesus, which is about prayer and worship. It is about reading the scriptures, reading the gospels. It is about doing those things. And also, I think Luke fleshes that out a bit more, which is that, Tabitha herself is a female disciple.
Yeah.
She is full of good works and acts of charity. So you've got those practical things, you've got the goodness, you've got the blessing your community, serving others and so on. But you've also got that resurrection life and the confidence that when we pray, actually God does things. He's promised to do that if we pray and we trust him. So that seems to me to be at the heart of what discipleship is about.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things that Luke points us to in discipleship is that he tells us about people, the language we use in our church, on front lines. What do people do when they're not worshipping with the Christian community? So Tabitha is, she's sewing things and she's making garments, she's doing acts of charity. At the end of this, in the very last verse, Peter goes and stays in Joppa with a certain Simon, a tanner. Luke is often very interested in people's occupations because he wants.
I've been there. I've been to the house.
Have you? Ah, right. Okay.
Got a little sign over it saying this is where Simon the tanner lives.
Okay.
If it is the house.
But he wants us to know where the gospel and our living as disciples is actually going to have an impact, and that's we've got to live it out in our daily lives, and I think that's.
So we might say to people on Sunday, "What are you doing this time tomorrow?" And what is your faith?
Exactly, and we do that every week in Histon, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Great. James, thanks very much. Great to talk about this passage with you. Yes. We never run out of things to say, do we?
Well, we don't seem to, but that may not be a good thing.
It's a reflection of the passage, not just us,
Of course.
Friends, thank you very much for joining us. Really good to have you here. Don't forget, do share this if you can and pass it on to other people. Don't forget to subscribe. And I think there's probably a button coming up on this side here, or it depends where I decide to put it. And then poor old James's face will be covered by last week's video as well. You can click and have a look back at that. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.